I was recently introduced as a speaker by someone I've known for 10 years who said, and the stories he tells, maybe they happened and maybe they didn't, but we like them. And it shocked me to the core. I thought, but I do write fiction, a lot of it. And this stuff I say here, this would be terrible fiction because it's too implausible and yet not quite fantastical. That's what makes these anecdotes work. They're too stupid to be fiction. Yes, they're improbable, maybe 1 in a billion, but that one, that was me. Anyway, today I decided to do something else. Instead of sharing a personal memory which sounds fictional, I'm going to share a fact for which I have photographic evidence, but of which I have no personal recollection. Just a bizarre photograph from Cincinnati in the late 1980s. I had to call my mom. Why is there a photograph of boyhood me dressed up as a medieval squire standing next to a pig? And where's the rest of the pig? All I see is a head on a platter. Like, did we go whole hog at a Renaissance fest? But the background's not a fairground. It clearly looks like a church. An actual Christian cathedral, delightfully festooned in holly leaves and crimson carnations, a Yule log, and other jolly talismans of pagan magic. She replied, "Oh, that was the Boar's Head Festival. It's an Episcopal thing." And I thought, but I was Episcopalian from the cradle to my 20s. I was literally born in an Episcopal church, the son of an Episcopal preacher man, but I never heard of weird cultic ritual stuff like this. And yet, there I am in this photo, clearly 8-year-old me forcing a sickly half-smile next to a severed swine head with pineapple rings and cherries pinned over its eyes. She thought a minute, then said, "I guess it's a Cincinnati Episcopal thing." Then she helpfully explained that Cincinnati, Ohio was known in the 1800s as Porkopolis because of all the meat packing and sausage making that went on there. And while other cities had feral cats, rats, and lizards, Cincinnati had piglets roaming the urban streets. Plus, the fat rendering and soap making gave rise to a major hygiene product giant called Procter & Gamble. This was the 1800s, not the 1980s, although I did find Cincinnati to be a piggish place to live. And it turns out even that was pig-related, since the riches of Cincinnati were born of selling pork rations to both sides of the Civil War. This Christmas-time tradition of the Boar's Head and Yule Log Festival has been practiced at Christ Church, Cincinnati from 1939 to the present, and apparently it requires the priest's firstborn son to dress like a village idiot. And seriously, doesn't that qualify as a form of child sacrifice? And they paraded this thing on a silver platter, not metaphorical, the physical head of a biological boar, the Lord of the Flies with its fruity eyes, on this triumphant march all around the aisles of the sanctuary while its sacrificial body got spit roasted and then served at a sort of northern pagan Thanksgiving in a subterranean Valhalla, also known as the parish hall. And a whole pig that's a lot of pork. Once, as a cater waiter, I had to help carry a spit-roasted pig for an event in Pennsylvania, and the pole was oily, and the thing kept slipping. And at one point, I said, "How far do we have to carry this greasy SOB?" A moment of bad cater-waiter decorum, and unfortunately, someone overheard it. So then, for the rest of the day, people kept coming up and asking me, "So where do I find that greasy SOB?" And I thought, we're in Pennsylvania. Throw a rock in the air. You'll hit one. They're all over the... Oh, you meant the pig. Yeah, he's that way. I mean, walk that way, and I think you'll be able to identify which greasy pig is the one we're eating. Like, you could identify him in a lineup. Anyway, whatever the event was, I don't remember, but it was clearly significant as an animal sacrifice to celebrate the sanctity of this gathering and the community of guests. In the ancient world, before refrigeration, Killing a boar or pig meant gathering the whole tribe and all of the neighboring tribes, even the neighbors you couldn't stand, since all of it had to be eaten at once. And the sharing of this undercooked meat was a sacrament that bonded all the eaters by blood as relatives. When my dad returned my call and found out that I wanted to ask about the Boar's Head Festival of Christ Church, Cincinnati, he huffed. If he was standing outside, I think he would have spat on the ground. His Cincinnati recollections are not much happier than mine. He finally said in this acidic way that only snodgrasses get to say it, "It's very English." Well, I responded, it's clearly not very Israelite. The most famous and mysterious religious attitude towards swine is in Judaism, and by extension, Islam, which gave shellfish the stamp of approval but maintained Judaism's horror of pork. Hogs are the bad boys of the Old Testament, even more than lions and bears and the Leviathan. You can actually eat the Leviathan if you can figure out what it is and find it. It's kosher. I imagine it tastes like chicken, or like tuna, the so-called chicken of the sea. The laws of the Torah explain that pigs are unclean because, unlike other livestock animals, they do not chew the cud. And if you're unfamiliar with that expression, it means that pigs are gross because they don't cough up their mouthful of food and then eat it again. This question of why the pig has been debated for 3,000 years. Some say it may have resulted from some outbreak of trichinosis from eating undercooked pork. This makes sense until we consider that trichinosis is far less dangerous than anthrax, which can be carried by cattle, sheep, and goats, but not pigs, and which, if you get it, is like swallowing all 10 biblical plagues on Egypt at once, likely resulting in horrible death. So there's not actually much to recommend this food safety rationalization. Herodotus, the Greek tourist historian, reported 24 centuries ago that the Egyptians considered swine unclean, to the extent that anyone who touched a pig had to immediately sprint off and leap into the Nile. Egyptian pig keepers were an untouchable caste, only allowed to marry among themselves, but once a year, at the full moon festival of Osiris, high priests would throw a big pork barbecue in his temple, and everyone had to stuff their face with pork. The origin of this tradition, Herodotus said, was told to him, but he considered it too filthy to share with Greek readers. And considering the salacious and sensationalistic rumors that he loves to wallow in, it's hard to imagine what Herodotus would find too shocking to put in print. It's possible the Hebrews inherited the pork taboo from the Egyptians, or outlawed swine because of its annual use in Egyptian rituals. But if the Hebrews were going to ban some animal to symbolize their break from Egyptian religion, it would have made more sense to outlaw the kin of the golden calf. But cattle are deuteronomically approved, as long as they don't have cheese on top, which is thrice forbidden. Some suggest that the pig is ritually unclean because it is habitually unclean. But this is pure slander, a literal smear campaign. The idea that pigs will root and wallow in their own excrement. Pigs don't sweat like humans do, and they are tropical by nature. So they'll cool their skin by rolling in water or mud. In the wild, or in a large enough pen, they'll fastidiously avoid rolling in mud they've defiled with waste. But if you're fattening a pig in a small pen and they don't have this choice, they will begrudgingly roll in whatever sort of mud they can, especially in an arid climate like Egypt or Israel. So if the Hebrews and Egyptians consider this animal unclean, it's because they've removed it from its natural habits and habitat. But on Pacific Islands, people keep pigs like dogs as pets, and some even let them sleep in their homes, which may be dirt-floored mud huts, yes, but the pig is otherwise cleaner than most college roommates. In the year of our Lord, 1340, the legend goes, a medieval Oxford scholar was walking through the woods on his way to Christmas Mass, reading a book of Aristotle. Suddenly, a wild boar appeared in his path, charging with its terrible tusks to gore this nerd. But an unseen power compelled him to raise the heavy, leather-bound book, and he bopped the raging boar on the head with his volume of pagan Greek philosophy. Interestingly enough, the credit went not to Aristotle, who certainly could have irrefutably proven himself the cause and mover of this miracle, but the credit went to Jesus Christ, who was declared the victor and savior, and this beast became his gift, and the head was paraded around to show how a pork extravaganza of gluttony could symbolize triumph over sin. And in the banquet hall they sang in honor of the King of Bliss, while stuffing their faces with fistfuls of swine, and behold, they dressed like Paisley Park. And this became the tradition of the Boar's Head Festival, which is celebrated in Cincinnati, and I've paraphrased this story from the glorious Good Tidings of the Christ Church website, which encourages you to attend since it's also a church fundraiser. I asked my dad to tell me more. Did you have to dress up like a duke? But he was finished on the topic. He said, I lit a candle, said a prayer, and I was done. He did not get into the ministry for any minstrelry or pageantry. He just does it to help people, which it turns out even priests can't do much of in the meanest city of America, which is part of why we left Cincinnati and spent the 1990s somewhere else. He wisely advised me to forget it and move on, leave the past in the past, which I think is the best advice you could give to anyone who ever lived in Cincinnati. But I told him, sorry, I have no choice, because I'm also a sort of preacher now, and this is too profoundly stupid to hide under a bushel. I must shout it from the rooftops. He changed the subject and gave me some really good advice about some other stuff that I'm going through. I woke up this morning and I felt, deep down in my heart, that this story of the Boar's Head was not going to help you make sense of the world we live in today. My guiding philosophy of public speaking comes from a quote by Jarvis Cocker. We love to hear your story, just as long as it tells us where we are, and where we are is where we're meant to be. And I don't know if this Boar's Head story can do any of that, although I'm now making a mental note that I should read Lord of the Flies to my kids to help them understand how Congress works. And I wonder, will I someday get a call from one of my children, all grown up, saying, Dad, I just found this strange old photograph. Did we once get swept up in some kind of swine parade? Did the USA visit a medieval dark age? I hope I won't have to say, yeah, that's why we left. I hope I can say, yes, but that was just the dark age before the dawn of a new renaissance.